All right. Wings up, everyone. Wings up, wings up, wings up. Hopefully, everyone is doing well. And welcome to our Wednesday night product training call with G2 Global Network. I'm definitely happy to see all of you on the call today. I am excited about our topic for today. You guys know that every Wednesday we do our training call. So make sure that you guys continue to tune in on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as we educate ourselves more about industry products and how we can better ourselves with knowledge and power of the knowledge of the product. Okay, so that's a really important thing that we really need to focus on as we are going through this journey of our financial growth in this G2 Global Network family. You know, on last week we talked about how to structure deals from a funding standpoint and how you can do what's called a capital stack. And with that capital stacking and certain ways to formulate real estate deals to fill that gap. You know, most of the time when people are trying to get funding for their real estate projects, a lot of times they just don't know where to get the funding from and how to get the funding. So, what I'm doing is teaching you all to or teach you how to tap into what we already have within our network, and that's solutions pertaining to funding. Okay, so with that being said, um, I want to discuss today about an exciting product and a program that we have. And those of you all on this call, you might want to really take advantage of this. This is an express funding solution for primary homeowners and investment property owners as well. Okay, so a lot of times people may have any type of situation going on where they need to tap into the equity of the property. They want to tap into the equity of the property fast. I mean, think about some of those investors that may have to finish out some repairs or some constructions or some type of development, and they need more funding, and they're not quite sure where to get this funding from. They already got the funding for the property, they've already got some funding for the rehab, and they've ran out of funding. So how do they tap into more funding, right? So that's a question. What about people that's trying to purchase a property and they don't necessarily have the capital to close? We kind of piggybacking off of what we talked about last week, but we're just going to go in depth a little bit more about these programs and how it actually works. So just make sure that you guys are taking notes as we go through this training on today. So this is our express funding solutions. This is something that you can definitely promote, offer to your clients, whether you want to use it for yourself, but offer it to your clients for sure. They will love this product because it is fast. It's a line of credit, whether you're a homeowner or whether you are a investor. Okay, you can utilize these funding express funding solutions. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to cover the express HELOC, which stands for home equity line of credit funding. Okay, we're going to talk about that express home equity line of credit. We're going to discuss sellers concessions, which is what we spoke on last week. We're just going to go in depth about that a little bit more. We're going to discuss private second mortgages. Private second mortgages. There's a number of ways to close deals. There's a number of ways to close deals. You don't necessarily have to have 20% liquid in your bank to close the deal. When we talk about using other people's money, uh, this is the name of the game. This is the way to go. You want to use OPM to close the deals all the time. Okay. So we're going to cover the sales concession, tell you how that works. We'll cover the private second mortgages. Well, a lot of people overlook those. Those are really I tell you, those are if you can talk to the seller and get them to do a private second mortgage for you for the closing costs. I'm telling you, you know, they can hold that second utilizing what's called a promissory note, things of that nature. Okay, and this is all equity based type structuring. All right, that's what this is. It's equity based type structuring. We can use transactional funding to help as well. Okay, so we're going to talk about closing these funding gaps. We're going to talk about investment property strategies, and then we're going to in and out with the primary residence strategies. Okay, so this is something that you guys need to know. So as you are talking to people that's saying, man, I need to get my hands on some money right now. I need to close this deal, or I need to pull some cash out somehow because I've got X, Y, and Z going on. One of the things you want to ask, hey, do you have a property? Okay. Do you have a property? All right. So, all right. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and move on. All right. So, what is express funding? What is express funding? All right. Express funding is designed to create closings that traditional lenders often cannot accomplish utilizing express funding. Okay, so understanding express funding solutions simply is it's a strategic financing system that's helping the clients to secure capital quickly. Okay, that's helping clients to secure capital quickly. Now, the main goal that I want you all to get from this is going to teach you, number one, how to close deals faster. How to close deals faster. It's going to teach you how to eliminate those funding gaps. Okay? Because that's what's missing. Eliminating those funding gaps. All right? It's also going to teach you how to reduce your cash requirements to getting these deals done. Okay? That's what it's going to do. It's going to help you to leverage equity for acquisitions. What does that mean? It's going to help you to tap into equity that's already in the property that you can use to close on that deal that you're trying to purchase, utilizing the equity that's already there. The name of the game is to be able to purchase properties and get into deals without any money coming out of your pocket. That's what you're learning. Okay, so it's going to teach you how to leverage equity for acquisition, and it's also going to teach you how to use sellers' participation strategically, how to get the sellers to participate strategically. Okay, so traditional lending is not the only path to closing deals. Traditional lending is not the only path to closing deals. Many real estate opportunities, many real estate deals fail because buyers don't understand creative financing structures. That's it. Many financial and real estate opportunities fail because buyers do not understand creative financial structures. Did you guys agree to that? And G2 Global Network, remember, our focus is on solution-based structuring. That's our focus. So if many real estate opportunities fail because buyers do not understand creative financing structures, then being the consultative agent that you are, you have to be focused on solution-based structuring. That's going to help your clients close deals, and it's going to help you close deals. By learning this technique, you don't have to sit around and watch people close real estate deals and you keep getting left behind because you feel that you can't get that deal done because you don't qualify. Okay. So our objective always is to help clients become financially positioned, okay, to acquire the real estate with them with very few delays. Okay. So that's our objective. Okay. So just remember that structure is more important than cash. The structure is way more important than you having the cash. You can structure a deal and not have a dime in your pocket and get in on $1 million deal that's going to make you $1 million on the flip and not have a dime in your pocket. All you have is an LLC and you've got a minimum credit score and you have an opportunity on a real estate project and you want to buy this property and you want to use your LLC, but you don't have any money to close. But yet we can get you qualified or get 80% or 70% of that project financed through our primary lenders. But even if you had 70% finance, you still have a 30% gap that you have to cover. Okay, so that's where the power of the equity comes in. Equity is a financial tool that you really have to use. Okay, what is equity? Equity is the difference between property value and existing debt. It's the difference between what that property is worth and what's owed on that property. What people will pay for that property is what determines the value of that property. So if that property is valued at $400,000, the existing mortgage is $220,000, then the available equity is $180,000 in that property. That's $180,000 sitting right there. So if I wanted to buy this property, okay, if I want to buy this property at say $300,000, just say they were selling me this property at $300,000. At 70% of that, I'm going to need $90,000 to close. I'll need $90,000 to close. Well, guess what? Look at this example. There's $180,000 in available equity. So when you start talking about things such as seller's concessions that can tap into that equity, that's the lender allowing us to use a portion of that equity to close. Okay, I may need $90,000 and the lender may say, I will allow you to use at least 5%, okay, 5% of the $300,000 for seller's concession, or I may allow you to use 10%, which is $30,000, right? You still have to come to the table with $60,000. Still have to find out another 60. Or I can go to the seller and ask the seller if they could carry a second note for me, private sellers, by utilizing a promissory note to say, I need $90,000 to close. If you allow me to use $90,000 of the equity and you hold a second mortgage for me, a private second mortgage, and we're going to use for that $90,000, I'll make you monthly payments every month on that $90,000. Okay, and you can tell them I'll do that for 5 months, 6 months, or a year, and then cash you out. Okay. So there's different ways, right? What if, this same scenario, I need $90,000. I need $90,000 to close in this same scenario. Okay. I can utilize my personal credit as well to do what's called gap funding. And it'll be based on my credit scores, it'll be based on my income, and I'll just borrow the $90,000 and close. Okay? I'm still not coming out of my pocket with anything. You want to see how this working? You just got into a $400,000 property value deal for $300,000. Okay? And if you put some work in it, it'll probably be way more worth more than $400,000. But for the sake of argument, you can take this example and use that equity to close the deal. So why does equity matter? Equity can be leveraged. That's why it matters. Equity can be leveraged. Okay? Equity equals property value minus, the debt, right? But it could be leverage. It gives you borrowing power. It's not just ownership. Equity is borrowing power. It's negotiating power. Equity is structuring power. Equity can be leveraged to secure additional financing. It can be leveraged to structure private second mortgages like we just discussed. It can be leveraged to create seller's carryback like we just discussed. Equity can reduce the buyer's cash requirements, and it can help close the funding gap. Did you guys know this? Because if you did not know this, this means that you've been walking past deals and properties that you could buy and make hundreds of thousands of dollars in income just by structuring the deal properly. For my people perish for the lack of knowledge. Right? So, but when you have the knowledge and you know how to structure this, then it puts you in a powerful position. Equity creates leverage. The more equity available, the more flexible the transaction becomes. The easier it becomes to structure a creative financial deal. Listen, I caught a deal yesterday. I was trying to buy the property, and somebody came and purchased the property today. But the deal was the property's worth $550,000 and only needed $50,000 worth of work, and I was going to be able to pick up that property for $300,000. I jumped on the deal. Right away. And they called me this morning and said, man, sorry, Mo, they sold it yesterday. Right? Because I was going to put an offer on for exactly what they were asking for, but then I was going to use the equity to close. Let me show you another trick, okay? Another way that you can do this is by increasing the sales price. So in this particular example, I need $90,000 to close. What I would do if the seller did not want to grant me seller's concession, the reason why a seller would not want to grant the concession is because of two things. It's because they would lose some of their proceeds. It would take away some of their proceeds, and they're going to be taxed. The seller will be taxed on that concession. Okay, so a lot of times the seller don't want to participate in it that way. But the other way to use seller's concession Okay, you say, all right, fine. Here's what I'll do. I'll take the 400,000. I'm sorry, I'll take the 300,000 sales price. And I'm going, because I need 90,000 to close. I'm going to increase this by that 90,000. Okay, I'm going to increase that sales price by 90,000. So now this is at 500, and on the financing paper, it's at 490. The sales price is going to be now 490. Okay. So I'm sorry, not 490. I'm sorry. It's going to be 390. It'll be 390. All right. So the sales price will now be 390. The seller only wanted 300,000. So where's that extra money go? It goes to closing. It goes to closing. So that's a way for you to that's another way for you to eliminate a lot of the debt. Okay, the closing costs, right? All right. So that would be 90,000 that we could use that way, and take away 90,000 from the 117 that's left. You would need let me see. So you would have to come to the table yourself with like $27,000. Still not bad. So a lot of different ways. Okay, we're talking about the power of equity. The goal is to knock this down. So if you keep your credit, this is another thing. Keep your credit above 680. Keep your utilization under 30%. As an investor, let your clients know that. Keep the recipe. Remember, we talked about the recipe. That way, you can always borrow the money if the concession doesn't work, if the seller don't want to do a promissory note for and carry the second because they want all of their proceeds or something right now, because that it can tap into their proceeds. Okay, so the more equity in the property, the better when it comes to the negotiating. Okay, the better it comes to the negotiating. So the seller's concession, what does that mean? It simply means using seller's concession to reduce the buyer's cash. What are seller's concessions? Seller concessions are credits. Okay, seller concessions are credits given by the seller to help cover closing costs, prepaid expenses, interest rate buy downs, and certain financial related expenses. Okay, repairs and things of that nature. Why seller concession matters? They help buyers preserve liquidity. It helps you to keep money in your pocket. It reduces the buyer's immediate cash requirements. How does that work? Take a deal that's for $300,000. The lender says, "Hey, we will allow 6% seller's concession." Right? So 6% seller's concession is only $18,000. Well, depending on what the lender is requiring, whether 70% or what have you, if you use 75%, that's $75,000 at 75% that they would have to come to the table with, right? But the seller's concession gives you a 6% or gives you $18,000 credit. So basically, you would just knock $18,000 off of the $75,000, which is $57,000 that's left. So you still got a $57,000 deficit. How do I eat that deficit? You can do that by way of asking for a promissory note on the second. You can do that by way of utilizing gap funding. You can utilize an equity partner to come in. Okay. These are I'm trying to teach. The obvious way, of course, is to have the cash in your bank. That's obvious. But what I'm showing you all is how to do this without the cash. So you can get in the game, right? How do you get into deals without the cash? There's a strategic advantage to using seller's concession that allows the seller's concession allows the buyer to keep their money in their. So you can use that capital somewhere else. Seller concession and deal fact. And listen, that's such a 6% seller's concession because we're like secondary lenders and we have private money. We can go up to like 10% seller's concession. So I would have been able to give them at least $30,000 on a seller's concession. I've got a lady right now that's closing on a house in New York, and just today I was able to secure like $80,000 for her, so she can close. Okay, and this is because her credit is where it needs to be. So if you play the game of the credit and make sure that your credit structure is in place, you can always borrow the money. You don't need to have this money. Play the credit game. That's another leverage game. That's called leveraging. You don't have to keep walking past these buildings and these four units and multi units and these single family homes, all these cash flowing properties, and you say, "Oh, that's a nice property. I wish I could buy that." When you can buy it, what's stopping you? You got your LLC, so you can buy it under your entity. If you don't, you need to go set up an LLC. Go set up a business, an LLC, just so you can buy properties in. You're under the network that's doing the funding. You're with the network. Okay? So set up the LLC so you can purchase the property. So there's different loan programs that does have limits on seller's concession. Let's keep that in mind. So conventional loans, like going to the banks or traditional banks, they're pretty hard on utilizing seller's concession. So they're not going to give you as much. FHA, they've got their guidelines as well. Investment loan has their requirements. Everyone has different requirements. Like I just stated, because we use investment bankers, we can go up to 10%. A traditional conventional lender might say you can only use 3 to 6%. Okay. So we talked about increasing the purchase price by the amount that we need so we can use those seller's concessions, and the owner or the seller won't take a hit in terms of their proceeds. When you do it that way, they don't take a hit in terms of their proceeds. Okay. It improves this deal flexibility still, and it still reduces your out-of-pocket cash. Okay. So when structured correctly, sellers' concessions help bridge financial gaps. It increases deal viability. And it improves the approval positioning. So seller's concession is a great thing. People just don't know that it exists. How many times have you heard that term, seller's concession, besides being in our trainings? Prior to our trainings, how many times, some of you all know about that, but what about those of you all that don't know about seller's concession and how to utilize that? Okay. So the other way is called seller carried private second mortgages. This is another powerful one. One of my clients just closed on a 25 unit property utilizing this structure. the property was for $2 million, and they did a second carry for $600,000 for a second mortgage to close the deal. He owns the property now. Just that simple. He didn't have to come out of his pocket with any money. So understanding the power of seller carry financing is huge. Instead of receiving all the proceeds up front, the seller agrees to carry a portion of the financing. Instead of the seller getting all of their money at closing, they're saying, okay, I'll take 70% of my proceeds now, and I would allow the other additional 30% to be carried on a secondary mortgage, private second mortgage. Done. Deal done. The deal is done. You're in that property. Just that simple. So instead of receiving all the proceeds up front, the seller agrees to carry a portion of that financing. And the seller agrees to hold a private second mortgage and accept the repayment over time. How is this secured? It's secured by a promissory note. It's recorded. It's recorded on the title, and it's a lien. Okay, so it's going to be on title. The equity is positioned in the property. This is secured by the property. So it's going on title as a secondary lien. Come on, let's do another example. This is good stuff, you all. Take this information tomorrow, go out and start looking for properties, right? This is good stuff. The purchase price is $300,000. The first mortgage is $240,000. Okay? The seller is willing to carry a $40,000 second note. And in this example, the buyer still has to bring $20,000 to the table. But you can use all of that depending on the equity in the property. We could have just got them to do this for $60,000 as a secondary note, and you wouldn't not have to bring anything to the table. But what if you do have to bring $20,000 left to the table? Where do you get the $20,000 from? You get the $20,000 from utilizing equity partners. You get the $20,000 from utilizing unsecured funding, which is gap funding. You can get the $20,000 by using seller's concession right there, right? So what if the lender gives us a 6% seller's concession? We can use that too in combination. The seller will carry the 40, but they can also do concession for the 20. You guys see what I'm going with this? This is how you get into deals with no money expense. Okay? So the benefits to this is you having lower cash that's needed, easier acquisition, faster closing. Okay? The seller's benefit is additional income stream, potential interest rate earnings, and more flexible sales opportunity utilizing this structure. So what if you were an investor selling your properties? Couldn't you sell more properties like that? You could put more people on properties like that and take some of your proceeds now, put them in a property, put them on a monthly note, and allow them to carry a second with you. Your property sold. We're sitting around and we're looking at real estate deals going by and not getting involved because we do not know how to properly structure it. This promissory note is huge. Utilizing a promissory note is huge. A promissory note is simply a legal promise to repay the debt under agreed terms. That's it. It's the note where the legal agreement where the borrower promises to repay. The terms are all spelled out in that agreement. The interest rate and repayment schedule all spelled out. Everything is lined out for you with that promissory note as they're carrying a second for you. Okay? So the promissory note formalizes the private second mortgage. It protects the seller's position and it creates enforceable repayment terms. They can foreclose on you. Did you know that? They can foreclose on the entire property. If you stop paying that second mortgage, that lender can come and force a foreclosure. Okay? So these terms, when you're doing the secondary note, right? Terms typically, they're typically going to include monthly payments in those terms. It's going to include any deferred payments. It's going to talk about interest only periods, any balloon payments, any maturity dates. That's what's going to be in that promissory note. Whatever you guys decide, okay? So whatever those those monthly payments are, if there's any deferred payments, any interest only periods, you might say that this is going to be good for a 4 or 5 month interest only term. And then after that, we're talking about a balloon payment, right? But that's going to be spelled out inside of that promissory note coming from the seller. Once again, you're utilizing the equity and not coming out of your pocket with any money because you've asked the seller to do a promissory note for the second. You're trying to figure out how to get into this deal without any money out of pocket. That's what you're learning. Okay? So the note creates the obligation. The mortgage secures the obligation. The note creates the obligation, but that mortgage and that property is what's going to secure it. This allows the equity to become the financing tool. This is why the equity is so important. Okay? This is why it's so important. All right? So, when you keep thinking about the equity, some of the people, especially investors, right? Especially investors, they want to buy as many properties as they can, as fast as they can. You agree? They want to buy as many properties as they can, as fast as they can. They want to get them off the market. If you had the ability just to go and buy and use OPM, other people's money, and keep going, you bought one property, now I'm going to go get another one. Oh, I see another one. Oh, I see another one. Because remember, these loans are based on the strength of the property. You just got to find good deals. You got to find good deals. Okay? So G2 Global closes these funding gaps in a number of different ways. Okay? We close these funding gaps in a number of different ways. All right? So our funding stats can include a number of things: primary mortgages, HELOC financing, seller's concession, okay, private second mortgages, personal liability, investors' capital, business revenue positioning. There's a number of different things to position yourself to getting the funding or closing the funding gap. You can use HELOC financing, the home equity lines of credit. seller's concession, private second mortgage, personal liquidity, that's money in your bank, investors capital, right? So you want to be able to utilize these gaps or utilize these products to simply close the gaps. Okay. So one of the things you've been seeing going on over the internet within our group, we've been talking about our program. We've got a new program. This is a 5-day closing program. This is our Express HELOC program. It's brand new. Okay. This is not done through a traditional bank. This is some of our what we call fintech banks and secondary lender banks. Well, this is going to get done in 5 days max, right? So clients love this program because it's fast approvals, very fast approvals. No appraisal is needed. You want to learn about this program, okay? You may have family, friends, people that you know that's in the real estate game and they've bought properties, they haven't sold their properties, and they need to take out some money against their property. This is a great way for them to liquidate some of their equity within a matter of days. Okay. Clients like this program because of flexible qualification methods, alternative income solutions, right? Quick access to capital. They love this program, right? So let's talk about this. The minimum credit score for a primary residence, if that client lived in this house, and this is their primary, or what we call owner occupied property. In order for them to pull out any cash out of that property within that 5-day period, they need to have at least a 600 credit score, and we can take up to 85% loan to value. Okay, 85% loan to value. So what does that mean? You guys remember, loan to value is what the lender will lend you opposed to the value of that property. Against the value of that property. Okay, so this property is worth $400,000. The lender is saying, I'll give you $340,000 line of credit. Okay, so now you say, wow, all right, $340,000, but you owe on this property $140,000, right? So 140, we're going to back that out, and that's going to give you a $200,000 liquid access. So here's that person in this scenario that has a $400,000 property that owes $140,000 on it. They need some cash. I just figured out how to give them $200,000 in cash on a line of credit, by the way, within 5 days. Huge. Okay. Huge. This is private money. This is not traditional bank money. The interest rates are not bad. The interest rates are running anywhere between 9 to 11% for the interest rates. The investment property, it's a little bit more of a strenuous requirement. You need to have that 680 credit score, which is that recipe number. Again, you guys keep hearing me talk about the 680 all the time. You know, you want to be at that number and better. You know, just keep that number. I would say keep your credit over 700 if you can. But for investment properties, the minimum requirement is a 680 on FICO 9, which is your Experian score. The loan to value for investment properties is only 70%. So if we use that same example of an investment property that's worth $400,000, the bank is saying that I'll give you a $280,000 line of credit minus whatever you owed on that property, whatever's owed on that property. Now, if nothing's owed on that property, then that whole $280,000 can be used by you. But whatever is owed on that property, they're going to back it out of that number. Okay? They're going to back it out of that number. They're not going to take over the first mortgage. They're just going to back it out of that number, and that's what you're going to have access to. Okay. So in this example, your mortgage is $140,000 balance. All right. That leaves you with 100 out of 280,000. That leaves you with $140,000 access. But this is done in 5 days. So that investor now has a line of credit. Here's the good thing about the lines of credit. Remember about lines of credit, you can keep using that money over and over and over. So even after you get that line of credit, and once you pay that line of credit back, you get to use that credit again. So it's not like an unsecured, what's called a closed-end loan. That means it's an amortized loan. It doesn't work in that capacity. This works in a revolving matter, almost like a credit card, just like a credit card. It's revolving debt. What you pay, you get to reuse. So that's another selling point when you are presenting this particular express home equity line of credit for investors or your private homeowners. Okay, so you can use this for down payments on other properties. You can use this to fund another deal, rehab expenses, business liquidity, investment, acquisitions, all type of stuff. Okay, so unlike a lump sum loan, home equity lines of credit can be drawn repeatedly over and over and over. Okay, you want to make sure that the credit score is intact. Just to make sure that your credit score is intact, 680 or better, that the income ratio is 30% and under, and property equity position is in the positive. Okay, you want to make sure of that. All right. So, and you want to make sure that that mortgage history is intact. All right. So, home equity lines of credit is a leverage tool. It's not free money. It's a leverage tool. But when you're talking about structuring deals and different types of ways to structure the deals, these are the different ways, different opportunities. Okay? Different opportunities. So the document submission process, all right, it's not bad. It's not bad. All the lender wants to know is the property value, what's the balance on the mortgage, and what's the occupancy type. All right? The occupancy type. We got renters in there, or is it empty? Or are you living in this property? That's number one. Okay? Income verification, W-2 or 1099. Either one is fine. They just want to see what the monthly income is, and if it's a business, what that business revenue is. If it's a tenant in that property, they're going to want to see what the monthly rent is being paid. Okay, they want to know if any late mortgages, payments on that mortgage within the last 12 months. Okay, so these are the things that you need to have. This is simple. That's simple. W-2 or 1099. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Just go get an LLC so you can start buying investment properties. You don't need a lot. The deal has to make sense. Remember in this arena that everything is backed by the deal. So these are asset-based lenders. These are asset-based lenders. They're concerned about the deal. Okay? So investors love this type of structure because it focuses on cash flow for them. It focuses in on equity growth. It gives them acquisition leverage. And it gives the investors portfolio expansion. They get to go and buy more properties to put into their portfolio. What are they doing differently than what you're doing? Nothing. They're simply going out, taking action. That's what they're doing. So I'm not going to say nothing, but they're taking action on the information that they have. You can take action now because you have information knowing that you can get into deals and structure these deals properly without having any out-of-pocket expense. So the common strategies that investors use is 5 strategies. Buy and hold when they're doing this type of funding, creative funding. Fix and flips, you guys know that. The BRRRR strategy, which is the BRRR, is BRRRR, right? That means to buy, renovate, rehab, and repair. Refinance, and then repeat. So it's buy, repair, refinance, and repeat. That's too many R's in there. Okay. Seller's financing is another strategy. Equity stacking is another strategy. Okay. So the capital stack will include the primary mortgage. Remember, this is from last week's challenge, but it can include the primary mortgage. It can include the HELOC that we just discussed. It can include the private lender. It can include the second seller's second. Right? It can include all of those. It can include investors' capital. Okay? One deal may contain multiple layers. One deal. One deal could contain a seller's second. It could contain a HELOC money from a HELOC. It could contain money out your pocket. It could contain an unsecured loan. But most deals are done on multiple layers. Sophisticated investors understand leverage and the layer structure. All the bigwigs know this stuff. This is why we're sitting around and letting everyone else buy deals, because we think that they just got a pocket full of money. They don't. They're leveraging OPM. You're just not doing it because you don't have the information. Well, you have more power and you have more information after tonight. That you now know that you can go and get into a deal tomorrow, utilizing your LLC as the buying entity, getting 70 to 80% from the bank, from us, right, and our lender. You're going to come back to G2 Global Network. And then we're going to structure that 20 to 30% gap by utilizing concessions, equity partners, gap funding, HELOC, right? Or a promissory note. Okay? What about the EMD? Some of these properties require you come up with 10, 15,000 EMD. Guess what? You get to come back to your network again, because we're going to use OPM. Because now for the EMD, which is the earnest money deposit, we're going to use our transactional funding program, where we put up the EMD for you. Okay? As long as it's refundable, we're not going to sign a non-refundable EMD. If we got to come in as a third party EMD and transactional provider, we have to make sure that the title company has instruction to refund this money back to the third party if for some reason that deal doesn't go through. It cannot be under a non-refundable arrangement, because if that deal doesn't go through, then we lose our money as investors. And I highly suggest that you as investors also don't ever sign a non-refundable EMD. Make sure all of your EMDs are refundable. Okay. So you don't have the 10,000, you don't have the 20,000. You can still tell the realtor, okay, fine, we'll be ready with EMD. because you know that you could come back to G2 Global Network and we'll be happy to put up the MD. You still have to pay a fee for that, okay, depending on how much you're getting. I'll give you an example. The last person that I did, they had to come up with 21,000, or they needed 21,000 in earnest money deposit, and we had to charge $5,000 up front. Now that's non-refundable. So you have to pay us to put our money up. That part is non-refundable. So we're going to put up not 21,000. You have to pay $5,000. Okay, we got to put up like 40,000. It's going to be a little bit more than that. I think it was more like 75,000 or something like that. I'm sorry, 7,500. It just depends. Okay, so but keep in mind, still, that's a big difference between you having to come up with $40,000 and you having to come up with 7,000, or you having to come up with 20,000, then you having to come up with only 5. You're still getting into these deals with no cost or minimum cost. It's all about structuring. So the goal is structure. Structure, structure, structure. The strongest real estate investors understand that deals are won in the structure. The deals are all won in the structure. Structure the deal right. Structure the deal right. Now you can create your offers better. Equity creates leverage. Okay? Equity creates leverage. Seller's concession reduces your buyer's cash, utilizing seller's concession. Promissory notes create flexible financing. And seller carried seconds closes these funding gaps just by using seller carry second. This is the structure. HELOC programs can create speed and liquidity for you. This is the structure. What's the takeaways again? Equity creates leverage. Equity creates leverage. Equity creates leverage. You have to know how to leverage, especially when you're negotiating. Anytime that you negotiate, the first thing that should come to your mind is that I'm going to come in at 60% of what the market value is. 60%. I'm going to start them there because I need room to add on seller's concession, right? Remember, I'm trying to tap into the equity. So if I can get them at 60%, I know I've got a 40% equitable position that I can use to close with. Okay? So even if they say, no, I want to take it up a little bit more, okay, depending on the equity position, it could be 65%, whatever. All right. So we need room to play with the equity. But if you go and put an offer on a property that's already at max value or max price, top tier pricing, you don't have any room to leverage. Okay? You don't have any room to leverage. All right? So here's our thought. When traditional financing stops, strategic structuring begins. In other words, when the traditional banks tell you no, this is when it's time to get strategic in your structuring. This is called creative financing. Okay? This is called creative financing. All right? This is equity positioning. This is private funding. This is real estate strategies and funding solutions, okay? All right. So just remember that deals fail because of structure problems, not necessarily bad properties. It's just structural problem. You're not structuring it right. and you can't sell the fundings. And so, even if you're not in the industry, you knowing how to structure this for your clients is what's key. You got to learn how to analyze available equity. You have to learn how to analyze the seller's flexibility, whether they're flexible or not. You have to learn how to pinpoint and analyze the funding gaps, as well as exit strategies and capital layers. But these are the things as the buyer and as the consultant that you have to learn how to analyze. So at G2 Global Network, we focus in on creative structuring. We focus in on equity positioning. We focus in on fast solutions and alternative capital access when the banks are telling you no. And we focus in on relationship-based transactions. So the objective is not to get a loan. It's not to simply get a loan. The objective is to build wealth, acquire assets, create leverage, structure opportunity, and close these deals fast. That's the objective. It's not simply about getting a loan. It's about building wealth, acquiring assets, and creating leverage and structuring this opportunity. Okay? So I want you all to study deal structures. Start looking at deal structures. When you start looking at, you can practice by, when you see a property, call the realtor. When you see a property, call the realtor, look up the address first, do some homework to see what that property is actually worth, market value, okay? And do some studying on that deal, on how you can structure it and what you want to offer. Then you call the realtor and say, hey, I'm interested in this property, but I'm willing to offer, and you give them your number. And make sure that number is about 60% of the market value. That's where you want to start. Okay? Now, what is your max? Your max is you don't want to go any further than you really 75%, and that's stretching it. That's stretching it. But you don't really want, I would even go as far as saying 70%. 75 is kind of stretching. Remember, you need room, and the reason why I'm saying that, we need room to leverage, and you still want to have equity left in the property when it's all said and done. So that's the win-win. Being able to use concessions and use the equity and then close the deal and still have equity in the deal. That's the win. Okay? You want to learn the lenders, all the guidelines. The more that you start learning guidelines, you get to use the money, OPM money, like it's money in your own account because you know the guidelines. You get to understand leverage. You get to think creatively and operate professionally because you understand the guidelines. Okay? So in my closing, you all, structure creates opportunity. The more funding strategies that you understand, the more deals that you can close. Okay? Focus in on this creative financing. Focus in on, positioning yourself on equity positioning. Focus in on that. Focus in on using other people's money. You can go find a deal tomorrow. You can find a deal tomorrow and go and close a deal and get into that deal just by structuring it properly without having to use your own money or very minimum cost. Okay? All right, that's my final thought for today. That's my training for the day. It's 8:07 with 7 minutes over the time. I do appreciate all of you all showing up for today's training. I will get these notes out to you. I'll get a handout for today's training. Don't be afraid to step out and to go out and talk to more clients. Even utilize this information for yourself, but promote that home equity line of credit program, guys. That's a fast funding program. You can get paid right away on that program. Okay, so let's go ahead and push that, and that's pretty much it, you all. I appreciate you joining this call, and I appreciate everyone's hard work and your efforts. I will see each and every one of you at the top. Okay, wings up.